There. I need to make a simple box for the top of a changing table, and there's a couple of different choices that I could make for the joinery on that. I could do a simple miter joint at a 45-degree angle. I could do a finger joint, like a simple box joint. I could do a miter joint with some inserts that cut across the angle to help make that a little bit stronger. Or I could go with dovetail joints. So I'm going to show you how I went about doing this. Went from doing about a 5-hour dovetail to I'm down to 30 minutes. Not quite the Rob Kosman and Klaus 3-minute dovetails, but I'll get there. I think the important thing to remember is that you want to have your pins on the front side so that your strength comes, if it's a drawer front or something like that, your strength is so that the drawer won't come apart as it gets used. That's why I decided to go with dovetails in the first place, is that they offer this extra strength for children pulling on the side of the drawer or whatever you may have. So the first thing you have to do is make sure that your boards are, I have them planed down, flattened, and they are the same thickness, planed down on the planer. And then you take your marking gauge, line it up, and make sure you have the width set, and then scribe the line in. The next thing I want to do is determine where I want those pins to come. So I've drawn a line around the bottom of all of my boards around the outside where I'm going to have a trim piece that comes up, covering up this edge of the board on the outside of the box. So visually, what I have left is from this line up. What I've done is laid out so that as I go across with the dividers, going from the mark to the edge of the board, this now is going to be the width of the inside of my pins. So I'll take my dividers, start at the bottom, step off one. That'll give me uniformed size pins. Pins being here and here. I decided on 2 and 3 for the tails. I think that that makes for a nice, pleasing look. This is a dovetail jig that you can use to measure your angles. It's the same angle on either side and square on the other end in order to mark pins, but in this case I'm only going to be using the tail side. The saws you can choose from vary from something like this dovetail saw to the pull saw, or this fine tool is a Japanese pull saw, but it has on one side for crosscut and on the other side the teeth are for rip saw. And I find that this particular saw gives me a really clean cut, also bottoms out for me so that I know exactly how deep I'm cutting. It has graduated markings on the inside here as to just where this guideline is set. Moves with a Allen key, so it's pretty easy to change it. And since I have this on the crosscut side and I'm actually ripping more than cross-cutting, where I have this currently set is at 21 and another half. So I'll put that on the other side the same way. Next, I'll be cutting out the parts that I've marked with an X. I always do that to make sure that I know which piece I'm getting rid of and everything makes sense. Don't want to make a mistake and cut the wrong piece out, ruin the whole piece. I want to get fairly close on this using a jewel saw. Get pretty close down to the bottom. I'm shooting across for this bottom line and staying above it. So that'll make my work a lot easier on cutting out the rest of the waste. So I've got my ends lined up together, tops together, outsides to the outsides. This is the way it's going to come together with this board just sliding down on top of my back piece. I want to make sure that I don't have a gap back in there. You can see the light coming through. I want to bring that up just to the point where that disappears like that. And that's where I'll mark it. And if anything, when I cut on the line, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm to the waist side and not cutting into the part that I want to keep. It's rather critical when you're cutting the pins to ensure that you're not cutting away the part that you still need. That'll give you too loose of a fit. You can see where that follows right into the cut or into my score mark. And you don't want to pull backwards because that would damage the shoulder. What I've been doing is bringing this down to just to where I can no longer see any of my knife marks to be able to get my side piece. Now that I have it just barely going in, there's two things I'm going to do. First of all, on the back side, I'm going to go ahead and chamfer those edges just a tiny bit to help it ease on a little bit better without actually bruising anything. The back side here is not going to show. Okay, so it's enough so that it'll hold on the piece. So what I want to do now is figure out where it's too tight. I'll just take my pencil and graphite in these edges so I can see where the issue is. So you can see where I've got a couple of graphite marks, and that's where it's too tight. It's real easy to just pare it down to have a really good fit. Just a little bit from this front edge, but mostly from this back edge. Final step in the process will be to shave down with a plane, shave these down smooth, and then I'll be rounding over the edges because it is a child's changing station area, and that'll make it a nicer, softer edge on the corners. While my dovetails may not be the perfect dovetails, it's a start, and I am just a beginner at dovetails. And as Klaus would say, in 2 or 3 years, you'll be a pretty good beginner yourself.